All right, well, let's just get started. Thanks for coming to this. I hope this is a good format to answer the questions that we tend to get throughout the year for people in a way that's good and helpful and respectful of everyone's time, and then is sort of everlasting by putting this on YouTube. So I'm just going to hop into it. We have a lot of questions, and they are really some big questions. I think I've got about 3 to 5 minutes a question, so I may have to kind of cut it and hop to the next one. And all I can do is share my experience and be honest about the ups and downs. But I think it's worth saying to start with that someone else's experience is going to be very different. And things could go just entirely different than what I'm saying. So I just wanted to start with that kind of caveat, because I don't want to share my experience and you to assume that you'll have the same struggles or the same successes. But let's hop into it. How did you get from idea to action? I think I should probably admit first that I'm the sort of person who is like always wanted to be an entrepreneur and is an entrepreneur for the sake of entrepreneurship, more so than I was into slow fashion. So though I was entirely within slow fashion as a shopper, I just didn't know for sure that I wanted my business to be within fashion. That was unexpected for me. So I think that from idea, I try to always remain really open to the ideas that are coming to me. And this idea came very suddenly, and to start Danu Organic. And it came when I went to a fiber shed event, mostly to make friends. And Sally Fox happened to be the speaker. And she also happened to be selling her fabric at that event she was speaking at. And by the end of the meeting, I had committed to buying $10,000 of her fabric. So that was a very fast idea to action, like a 1-hour meeting of knowing somebody. And the hardest part is always just doing it. You have to just do it. And you have to, we can spend all day sitting around doing other things that are not the top on our priority list. So I think it really helps I was at a place, I had a small business at the time that I started Danu Organic, and it was going all right, but by staying open to ideas, I received the idea for this other business, and it's definitely going more all right than my first small business was. So just listening to that inner voice and taking action when it's speaking strongly is the right way to do. And if you're at a time, which I think still happens frequently, and I would say I'm certainly there at this very moment with Danu Organic, where I'm not quite sure what the right idea is. And in those times, I think I just really try to wait for the right idea, try to tune in to myself and allow myself to take better care of myself and go on a run and meditate, and then wait for the idea that says you need to take action on this, and then do it. I'm going to do the next question. Did you start with copyrights patenting first? Don't tell, but I still haven't done any of that. And I probably should. This is a different business, but I had a podcast at one point where I did try to copyright the name of the podcast. And it ended up, I was sent a cease and desist, and I did go down the copyright path once, and I saw enough of it that I said, I'd rather just change my brand name again if I end up having an issue like this, because it's not important enough what your business is called. If you're creating ideas that are original to you, copied.
I can tell I'm on mute and no video. What's up?
I thought that you were on the phone, but you weren't.
Okay. So yeah, if you're creating ideas that are original to yourself, nobody can copy it. It's an original idea, even if they try to copy it, which I have been copied already to this point, and I see it, and they're just, no one's ever going to be successful with an idea that's copying someone, because it doesn't have the right energy behind it to attract the audience. So I would say don't worry about that unless you have a lot of money to drop. And then it's, a reasonable place to drop money, but I didn't have a lot of money to drop. So I have still not done that, though. At one point, if I do have spare cash, I probably will do that just to get some peace of mind, but it's definitely not a priority. Were business loans sufficient, or did you need a large personal investment? I went down, I don't know what we're calling large. That's definitely up for debate, but I went down the large personal investment route. I had worked a series of sales jobs, mostly in online grocery, but the slow food side of things, and had some savings when I started Danu Organic, and started with that $10,000 investment to Sally Fox to make the fabric. So to me, that felt like a large personal investment, definitely the riskiest thing that I'd ever done investment wise. And then I ran my business on my savings until I ran out of savings. And I've worked some side jobs, multiple side jobs, like 4 or 5 little part-time jobs, even if they hit full-time hours sometimes. To keep myself going through that. And I'm looking for another one right now. So it wasn't like an easy path, and it's definitely been financially stressful, to be perfectly honest, but I'm still going and I'm happy about that, and I can keep going. So every day that I can keep going is a good day. And a small business loan is a great way to go. I have been geographically spread out enough that my paperwork is hard to get organized, though I may organize it and apply for a small business loan, because I do think that is a pretty good way, probably the best way to fund your business if you don't want to lose your values. Getting investors is so popular, and my podcast was about conscious entrepreneurship, and I just haven't seen a business that is able to keep their values that has investors, which is why it's really important to me to never bring on investors for this business, especially. I wouldn't say investors are always bad. I think there's a way you can do it right, and there are businesses that it's a fit for. And I could get investors for this business, I have no doubt, but it is such a values-oriented business. I just don't want to risk the pressure to earn money faster, turn more of a profit, cut corners, because we're all about not cutting corners. So, but I think a small business loan, if you can qualify, go for it. Really, that would be pretty relaxing for me to have right now. When you think of your core team, think day one, what brought you together? I was my core team on day one, and I brought myself together. I did end up hiring probably sooner than I would have hired if the pandemic hadn't hit, but I hired my first employee probably a few weeks after the pandemic hit, because my living situation shifted in a surprising way because of the pandemic. And I had no space to keep my inventory. I started off shipping out of our vehicle for the first 6 months from my sailboat. So, and that changed, and I couldn't do that anymore. And so I needed help shipping, and I'd met somebody at a Fiber Shed event who was interested, and it was just a really good fit. And so, but I think that was a blessing in disguise, because not only did it meet this very basic need of shipping, but it also gave me somebody I had to show up. Like, I could not go a week of mulling around. And when you start a business, you get maybe 1 order every 3 weeks is awesome. And it's easy to get pretty down during those days. And I still did, but I still had to show up, and I had somebody to bounce my good ideas and my bad ideas off of, and their good ideas and bad ideas bounced off me. So I think that I got pretty lucky. That was a blessing in disguise. And then we just hired our second employee, who is here on the call. Hi, Sarah, as well. And that was just at the end of last year, December, at the end of I'm pretty bad with dates, 2021. And so now we're a team of 3, and I'd say we're all part-time, myself included, probably. So we were brought together by a love of slow fashion. there are a lot of people who really love slow fashion and are connected on that front and tend to be connected in a lot of other more subtle ways. So it's been nice. I think I answered that question. If I hit your question and like really miss the ballpark, feel free to send a chat there. As an Ecuadorian, I think it's so cool that you honor my family ancestors' traditions in a multitude of ways. And that was such an honor to receive. And I had to ask them to elaborate just to make sure I didn't take it the wrong way. But it was about using traditional methods to make clothes. And of course, we are benefited by some very modern machinery, and our clothes are made in a factory rather than in the individual family home. But we're working with plants, and that is how clothes used to be made. And they're not hurting the earth. So I think that when we're working like that, we're really honoring all ancestors everywhere, because we're honoring the earth. And these connections are what has been broken that leads us to a lot of the sadness of where we are today. And I think even if ancestors may not care, there's definitely some ancestors that may not care at all about the sort of work we're doing. I think it's honoring to every being, because, and yes, we do fail. We're not perfect. We do fail in some ways, but it's about doing the best you can. What is it like sourcing from small businesses internationally when you're starting as a small business yourself? I didn't do much international sourcing, though I'm doing more now, but it's not hard. I guess my elastic came from Japan and Germany, so that was from day one sourcing that. But my thread and fabric came from the USA, so it wasn't too hard. English is the international language of business, which is a absolute privilege to have English as your first language. But because of that, it really isn't very hard to source internationally for me. I think it's very important to be respectful and acknowledge that privilege we have with English being our first language, or my first language, speak for myself. And it is a little scary sometimes, like shipments can get held up longer than you expect. And you're like, are they even coming? And you may have spent half your money on them or something, or all of it, and sending money through wire overseas. It does scare me a little bit more, but there are systems in place. And every time I don't know how to do something, I can just Google it and the answers are there. So in terms of finding, that is a pretty difficult part of Danu Organic to this date, the sourcing of materials. I spend a lot of time doing that. I find that here's a little tip. If you go, each country has like their own website, like .jp, or I don't have these right, but .ia might be Italy. I don't know. But if you use that website and search in there, there we go. If you use their like country website and search in their language, your results are usually better. Let's see, I don't know if I'm recording this well, but that has been kind of a little hack for me when I am getting into sourcing organic linen or organic silk, which I do not have, but that tends to work better. And I have tried going to the fairs, the fabric fairs that happen, but I haven't found that. I've never found a fabric there or an accessory there that I've ended up wanting to use. It's all been through the internet or contacts that have shared with me where they get their other things from. How much funds would you say you need to start your own business? Definitely not $10,000. I would not, if I could do it all over again, I would not do that way, because as you've probably known, we no longer have access to Sally's fabric. She's not producing it right now. And the hope of that was that I would have a steady access to that supply of fabric, and it didn't work. And so that was a risk I took, and it technically has not paid off, though I do not regret taking it. And it's been an absolute joy to work with this fabric while I have it. But apparently with the pandemic issues in the US of running mills and spinning businesses, she can't get another order through. So start small. Like if you have a chance, and start with things that are going to be in stock consistently. And well, what I'm learning now, there is no amount of diversification that can be too much. Like start with 4 different fabrics, expect 2 of those to not be available. And this is probably, it's a lot worse now than it would have been in 2018, just with the supply chain issues that are going on. Start as small as you can. If you can sew your own first clothes. I can kind of sew, but not that good. I wouldn't want to sew my own first clothes. Well, you wouldn't want to buy them is more so the truth. Though I did grow up sewing and can sew. Sewing is just such a skill. I don't have the hours put into it that makes me actually produce a good enough thing to sell. But if you do, I would highly recommend doing that. And I mean, you probably start a clothing business if you can sew with a couple $100, and if you can't sew, a couple $1,000, maybe 2, maybe 3. And the rest of the like business cost, you can keep the internet makes it easy to keep things pretty slow, keep things pretty affordable. That's what I meant to say. How to minimize risk. Start small, and diversify what you're offering for sure, but not to the point, like you might not need to diversify baby through adult. You just need to diversify your materials and actually get focused in on something that you're good at, that you're really passionate about producing. Maybe that's swim or shoes. You don't need to diversify your styles so much. And but I also don't know that living by how to minimize risk really serves us as an entrepreneur or a human. Life is risky. And I talked about this on Instagram a little bit lately, but I have for years done exercises to increase my comfort with risk. And that's different for all of us, but I highly encourage that sort of mindset or practice, because it is a practice for me, if you're going to have your own business, because I take scary risk all the time with Danu Organics still, and it wouldn't be here without that. So I don't think that you get to minimize risk so much as face your fears and overcome them, which is also a good thing. Though be smart, like don't do what I did with the $10,000 of initial fabric, and start small unless that is feeling really right to you. But there are times, I guess there's not very many times when I'm like, I need to minimize risk. And more so times where I'm like, okay, this feels risky, but it's probably the right move. Has your business been affected by supply chain issues? How have you adapted and communicated any difficulties or delays to customers? Drink of water for that. Yes, and it's bad. I guess right now it's at its very worst for me. It kind of caught up to me. A lot of businesses have been affected earlier, but I've had fabric after fabric become unavailable and out of stock, even threads out of stock for 3 more months. And you just can't predict that these are fabrics that I was told by the people I buy them from, they will always be in stock. The basic thread colors, they will always be in stock, and they're not. And the company I'm buying it from can't help it. They're facing issues with their spinning factories, their milling factories. So it's not as if it's their fault. It's just, this is kind of how the world is right now. And my customers love to know what's next. So this has been, even before the pandemic, really an issue. Like, when are you going to have those in stock again? You don't have my size. And I always want to answer, but I've found that I'll answer and then I won't be able to make it happen because of a supply chain issue, or because of maybe a garment didn't come out perfect in the first sample at the factory and we have to go back to the design drawing board. And so at this point, I try to avoid those questions with as much grace and thanks as possible, just because my answers, even when I give it my best shot, have pretty much always been wrong. And that isn't the most, it's not my ideal customer relationship. I would much rather, I think it's much more appropriate in slow fashion to give people as much detail as you can to help them plan what they're going to purchase in the future, and what they're going to add to their closet. And I have a lot of people that are like, oh, if you have like a rough timeline, like I'll hold off and wait for you to make it, because they love Danu Organic that much. And I just am not always able to answer their questions because a lot of it is out of my hands. So I think just communicating how out of my hands it is has been effective, but it isn't my ideal. And perhaps we can, as we grow, move into a little bit more of a steady cycle there where we can share more with customers and actually make it happen on our predicted timelines. How effective are your newsletters to generating sales? How often do you aim to send newsletters? They're a really effective tool at generating sales, and I aim to send them once a week. I do not send them once a week, and sometimes I will even go 2 months without sending one, which is not good. And I always am trying to send newsletters, though, that add value through either education or information that I think people do want to have. So there are times that I don't have something that I think is worthy of putting in someone's inbox, which is a space that I respect. So I won't send a newsletter. But I think allowing myself more time to work on that will be really helpful for growing Danu Organic. And there was a time that I got into a really good cycle because I had a blog post and newsletter accountability partner, another small business friend who actually might be here today. And that showed a significant uptick in sales. And so I highly recommend, you need to be building your newsletter from day one if you're going to start a business. It's a very important tool. Because it's free of, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but it's free of the algorithm. And it's a very intimate relationship. You choose to get on your email. It's something that you take seriously. I'm careful who I give my email out to, and I'm sure other people are too. But it's probably, Instagram definitely matters, but I'd say it's the most important tool to generating sales. Favorite apps, software, planners for staying organized. I'm not a very organized person, to be perfectly honest. That's one of my weaknesses. I sort of tear through life and have a lot of things going on, and I'll get really organized in one area and for a week and then drop it and be really organized in another area. But meanwhile, this other area that I organized, without maintenance, it kind of unravels. So we do certainly have, I have a notebook, I constantly have a notebook. It's not a great way to stay organized as a geographically spread out team. So we also use Trello, which is really helpful, and it's new to the business, but it's essentially this like movable Post-it board. We've been using it for like a year and a half, but we really started focusing on it when our most recent employee joined the team, and there was 3 of us in 3 different places, and we're like, okay, this is serious. We really do have to stay organized in a shared workspace. I make a lot of lists, a calendar. I feel like I had a better answer for this when I saw it. I do recommend Trello. It's a way, the way it functions allows creativity to still exist within organization. It's rather similar to Asana, which I'm not as familiar with, and they are different. I just don't know how. And I think it's really important to admit what you're not good at, which is organization for me. And as an entrepreneur, I'm not quite there yet, but the more help that I can get from my team in organization, the stronger our team is going to be overall, since I know that's a place that I'm not very good at. For you, that could be something totally different. And that's okay. It's not, if I spend all my energy trying to improve how organized I am, I'm not going to have energy for the things that I am good at that are good for the company. So I think it is important to know where your weak points are, and try to get help in them. I could definitely do that better, but do you get paid for this work? If not, do you plan to receive payment? How is that decided? Well, I would decide to pay myself and I do not get paid for this work. That's getting to a point where it is kind of painful. And I think I'm about to go through a shift, and Danu is, if we can get over this next hump of growth, which we are close to getting over, I think that we may find ourselves doing a lot better financially. But to this date, if there's any extra money, it goes into growing the business, because to grow, I'm not one of those people that needs to grow the business forever. In fact, I think that's a toxic mentality, but I want to grow it to a point that everyone in the team and our customers are like content with the size of the business, that we are producing the clothes that people are wanting, employees are paid that part-time, full-time, what they're wanting, I'm paid what I'm wanting. And at some point I will see that there is enough money to start paying myself. But I really don't think that's going to be for another couple of years at this point. And so I do other jobs, which you might see me getting really focused on our videos for the adventures of Sarah and Barley. And that's another way that I'm trying to earn money in a way that feels good to me. Yeah, it's why I just guess I want to be clear on like why money has to go back into Danu Organic to grow, is that if we are going from making 25 to 50 to 75 to 100 garments, I have to invest in that much more fabric, that much more thread every time we grow, until we get to a place where things are more efficient, essentially, because there's a lot of inefficiencies in running a small business. Unless maybe you're sewing yourself, which would be interesting. How do you source material? I've always wanted to start a business, and sometimes that seems like the hardest part, especially finding things without plastics. Yes, it is very hard to find materials without plastic, from shipping materials to zippers. Most people just don't care enough to want them. Most organic clothes is sewn with plastic thread, plastic zippers, they're dyed. And it's just such an oversight that I honestly don't even see how people are doing. Like, I've always lived my life, I guess, with a degree and attention to sourcing. And the first place that really came out was with my food. And I worked at slow food online grocery stores. So also in my work there. And I love sourcing. Like, I get a lot of joy from finding the best in things. And I remember being in high school and sofa shopping with my mom, and she said to me, you can walk in a room and choose the nicest thing. And I think that that's still the case. We're building our tiny house right now, and walking into a window sales room, the guy's like, no, you can't tell, it's plastic, you can't tell. And I'm like, yeah, I can tell. And so that's just something that I'm good at, and I find really rewarding, because I like to have things around me that are in harmony with my values and taking good care of the earth. So it's, for me, really personally rewarding to know that I worked hard to find this zipper that's surrounded in organic cotton instead of a plastic. And you just have to keep going. Like, I'm still trying to source additional organic linen, and you just have to keep at it. It can be a process. You get a lot of bad sources before you're going to get a good one. Yeah, and that is all the questions. So I guess if anything's come up for you over this chat, feel free to pop it in the chat bubble, and I will maybe answer like 1 or 3 more questions if anybody even has any. But thanks for coming. And I guess I want to say that, well, you think about your questions, that we live in a time where entrepreneurship is so glorified that I always like to point out that it's not like the best thing you can do. If it's what feels really right to you, then go for it. But it's not that it's better than another thing for you. Perhaps, you may so prefer to have the ability to turn work off. I never get to turn work off. And theoretically, I could perhaps, but I'm really not there. And I don't think that the culture that is, it's sort of fading out a little bit in my observation, but it's really strong still. And I don't think that it is always the best. There's a lot of people who start a slow fashion business or any business and find out it's not a fit for them, which is okay. That's part of the process. But yeah, and I think this question that came in is in that nature. Why do you think you were always so driven towards entrepreneurship, even without having a specific business idea? I mean, this was me as a child. I'm not quite sure. I love to, I have a lot of ideas. I probably have still like a new business idea that I get really excited about once a week, and one that drives me crazy once a month. And I have to like pursue that path, even though I'm not opening that many businesses. But I've always been this idea person that just has, it's about how you see the world. I see the world and I see needs, and I have creative ideas that fulfill solutions. And that really excites me, and it really lights me up and gives me really good energy. And the way that functions in this world is entrepreneurship's a good fit for that. And then I think there's also some probably some toxic traits too, that I'm literally just did a therapy session about, which was that I found a lot of workplaces I worked for to be a bit toxic. And I thought, oh, I don't have to be a part of this if I create my own business. It's just hard to be a young woman in business, as I'm sure I'm speaking to a lot of people who know and agree with that. I started working full-time managing people while I was at college still for a startup. And I think that I worked for some people and companies that were not great, and I didn't want to be a part of that. So I think that puts me in creating from a place of fear and risk avoidance, if you will, to go back to that, rather than always creating from my highest self. And that's where I always want to be creating from. So, it's a mix of things, but little kid me was like setting up shops and restaurants, and teenage me was saying, I don't want to go to college. I just want to open a business. And college me was like, I just want to be in business. I'm going to work a bunch of jobs and even take on, I took my work more seriously than I took college. So that's just who I am. I don't know. We all like to do certain things, and it gives me a lot of energy. So it feels right. Did I answer that? Did I answer everything? All right, great. Well, thank you for coming today. And the next one of these will be midsummer. And I hope that I was able to help answer some of your questions and you learned something and enjoyed it. Thanks. I guess we're good. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, everybody. Glad you liked it. I'm going to end the meeting, and hopefully the recording saved.